Trash Taste is an anime podcast started in 2022, originally advertised to be about anime and otaku culture, but gained their popularity from covering a wide variety of casual, relatable topics ranging from food and living in Japan to shedding.
I think it was like a magnitude 7.3. Yeah, Fukushima.
Created by its three hosts, Joey the Anime Man, Sea-Dog VA, and Giguk, Trash Taste has quickly risen to the top of YouTube as one of the biggest podcasts on the platform, exceeding all initial expectations and growing into something much bigger than the three Anitubers had expected. With over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and their Patreon raking in more than $50,000 a month, the quality of their content has only been on the incline, with the scope of their content and talents increasing. I've been a fan of Trash Taste for a little while now. From covering lore to inside jokes to explaining memes, I've made my fair share of content on Trash Taste, but I think it's safe to say that none of it even comes close to the sheer magnitude of what I'm about to cover. Something that exists outside of the realm of what is real, something that slipped out of control to such a degree that even the creators of the podcast could no longer understand what the hell their fanbase was talking about. And while I'm sure many of you are already at least aware of what I'm talking about, instead of sitting here and trying to explain it to you, it'd be much easier to just show you. Like the 20th Century Boys timeline, a timeline based on a random tangent in the podcast about Garnt's past in a band, in which the boys have been friends since they were kids, and as they grew up, a psychic Connor organizes a cult of terrorists to recreate the stories of his childhood, only to be stopped by Joey and Garnt. Or the isekai variant, in which Joey and Connor, after meeting their untimely ends during an earthquake, gets isekai'd into the world of Konosuba, based on the events of a Trash Taste After Dark TRPG stream with Demon Dice Karen, in which the boys are reincarnated as alternate anime versions of themselves. Or the Akashic Incursion. Actually, we're not ready for the Akashic Incursion yet, and I am totally ripping off of Eyepatch Wolf. And if this is your first time hearing about any of what I just told you, you're probably wondering, what the fuck am I talking about? And how did the internet take a podcast about anime and shitting and turn it into a multiverse, complete with its own lore, characters, plot twists, completely separate from anything the actual podcast is about? That's a question I also had to ask myself when I sat down to make this video. I mean, this shit is more complicated than the Fate timeline, and that's coming from a Fate fan. But after looking into it, hours of research, rewatching old episodes, and truly digging into what makes Trash Taste special, what I found at the end of it all was strange, bizarre, and weirdly beautiful. And I want to take you all on that same journey along with me. And what's a better place to start than from the beginning? The year is 2022. You and your friends, a group of creators you have known since the start of your careers, have just moved to Japan and secured a small apartment studio on the outskirts of Tokyo. It had been years of planning, but you'd finally made it. Moving to Japan after years of pouring your heart and soul into making these videos about your passion, anime, felt like a dream scenario, but this was your reality now. So you set up the studio, sit down next to two of your best friends, and start recording for what is supposed to be a 5-minute tech demo, a proof of concept for what would become the Trash Taste podcast. And you start talking, and you go on, and on, and on. And before you know it, the camera had stopped recording mid-conversation. And it wasn't because you manually hit stop recording or ran out of topics to talk about, but because the camera had reached its maximum recording length of 30 minutes, and a realization hits you that this might be something special. That was the story behind Trash Taste Episode 0 as told by Garnt himself on his second channel, and if you paid for the $5 tier on the Trash Taste Patreon, you could see this 30-minute episode for yourself. The set is incomplete, the iconic Trash Taste background music isn't there, and the whole episode is basically one big tangent that you'd see on any other episode of Trash Taste. And while the contents of the episode itself aren't anything special, watching the pilot after knowing the context behind it, listening to them after knowing how much of a success Trash Taste would be is kind of surreal. That despite all of their growth, Trash Taste at its core has and always will be what it's always been, a show about three friends talking shit, sharing their thoughts, experiences, and stories with each other and with you, the audience. But after having watched enough episodes of Trash Taste, there's something else you might begin to notice. Trash Taste was always meant to be a passion project. All of the success, the fans, the memes, they had expected none of it when they had set out to start this podcast, and it's in this episode 0 where you can most clearly see it. Three creators who had no idea just how big their creation would become on the internet. But how could they? Based on the sheer size and subscriber counts of the three boys and their respective channels now, it might appear obvious to most people that if three big YouTubers started a podcast, that podcast would become big. But if you were to take a look at other big YouTubers in similar niches who have also created their own podcasts and compare their numbers, you'll quickly find out that that's not necessarily the case at all. The Yard, Some Ordinary Podcast, Moist Critical's The Official Podcast. Hear it from the man himself.
Taste. Now, if you don't know, I have a podcast called The Yard. It's a pretty successful podcast, but it's nothing compared to Trash Taste, which gets millions of views every single episode.
Within a week of starting, Trash Taste had already crushed their initial goal of reaching 100,000 subscribers in a year. 3 weeks later, the Figure Special brought even more eyes on their podcast, bringing in the respective YouTubers' established audiences as well, and by the 5th episode, Trash Taste had already established itself for the kind of show it would be, and people loved it. Before Trash Taste, we had never known Joey, Garnt, or Connor. To the majority of the world, the Anime Man, Gigguk, and CDawgVA were separate YouTube personalities, their channels catering to very specific audiences, with Connor's channel having a notorious 93% female ratio. But being on a podcast where the meat of the content was them talking for 2 hours, the boys had to expose their real personalities to the wider part of the internet for the first time. And before long, their real personalities had even outgrown the personas that had taken them years to establish. Now, the boys were no longer the Anime Man or CDawgVA on the internet. They were Joey, Garnt, and Connor. And before they knew it, Trash Taste had become the center of their focus, even taking priority over their main channels, as they've expressed on an episode.
Because when we started, again, when we started Trash Taste, we were like, oh yeah, this will be like a nice side project for us to do, you know?
Yeah. No, like Trash Taste has become like almost the number one priority. No, it is the number one priority.
It is the number one priority.
When we need to schedule a recording, that's getting done before any of my fucking videos or any of my scripts.
Specials were being filmed, Twitch streams started happening weekly for the After Dark channel, made possible when they moved into a brand new studio. Trash Taste was no longer just a podcast. It had become an entire content agency, leaving the anime niche they had once been restricted to and rivaling the likes to some of the biggest creator groups on the internet, with more and more YouTubers and streamers being added into their lore, which is where that joke originally came from, bringing Trash Taste to the point it is at today. There's your crash course on the Trash Taste lore, you're welcome. But now that we're all caught up and you're still watching at this point in the video, you might be wondering what any of this has to do with a multiverse, and believe me, we'll get there soon. But the reason why I spent so much time explaining the lore, the real life story behind Trash Taste, is because I think what happened on Reddit afterwards, what the internet did to Trash Taste, may seem distorted and chaotic on the surface, but behind it all is a very accurate and honest reflection of what Trash Taste was to the boys. Something that had spiraled out of control, the growth of which was no longer within their hands, in which all they could do was try to go along with the ride as best they could and watch how important their creation had become on the internet. And it all started with one Reddit post. On March 3rd of 2022, an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.3 struck off the coast of Fukushima, the strongest earthquake Japan had faced in 10 years, which also happened to affect the area the members of Trash Taste lived in. And while luckily none of the boys were hurt or seriously injured, the following episode of Trash Taste, in which the boys talked about their experience with the earthquake, inspired a fan to post a meme on their subreddit, and one meme was all it took. On a Sunday of April 17th, just 2 days after the episode went up, Reddit user The Andy-san posted an original edit titled "Only Garnt Survived the Earthquake" on the subreddit. In the edit, we see a deranged Garnt talking to himself in the Trash Taste studio, while the two other boys stay frozen in time. He tries to make light banter and joke around as they usually do, only to be met with complete cold silence. And as the video continues, we see Garnt dive more and more into madness as he is unable to cope with the fact that the boys are no longer with him. While I'm sure the intention of the post was nothing more than to make a pretty high effort meme, something about watching Garnt laughing at his own jokes and struggling to host a podcast by himself is strangely haunting. The frozen, unchanging expression of the boys only adding to the horror of the edit. And something about that existential dread, that what if scenario resonated with people. So much so that this meme, now given a name, the Trash Taste Dark Timeline, inspired an insane new wave of similar posts, each adding to the post before it, building on top of the lore they had created, inspiring a dozen more. Now, instead of making memes about the podcast, people could add their own contributions to this hypothetical timeline, envisioning what this dark what-if reality would be like together. They could now post their headcanons and fanfics in the form of a meme, and if it got enough upvotes, it became canon. And while this may all seem very random and out of nowhere, if you were there during that phase of the Trash Taste subreddit, I think it's pretty easy to understand what the appeal was. Memes on Trash Taste just weren't that creative anymore. All of the most upvoted memes were usually just reposts, and if they weren't, they'd literally be screenshots of a tweet or a YouTube comment that was even remotely related to Trash Taste. Basically, the community was in a drought for original fan-made content, and this dark timeline was the perfect outlet to fight back against those unoriginal posts by breaking out of their limitation of what was real and creating their own jokes, lore, characters, and universes. So that's the story behind the dark timeline, but in true YouTuber fashion, I haven't actually explained anything yet. Where does all of this begin? Well, congratulations, because you officially made it to the part of the video where I actually explained the timelines. And to start, I'd like to begin by answering the question, why Garnt? Well, to answer that, look no further than the BBC time. On December 20th of 2021, Garnt uploaded a video titled Why I Left the BBC on his second channel, and in this video, Garnt recounts his story of graduating college, getting an engineering degree, and getting a job at the BBC, yet feeling like he wasn't getting the life nor future he believed he was promised he'd get if he pursued this sort of lifestyle. And besides the whole Garnt worked at the BBC meme, I think the story of how he was finally able to let his father retire after quitting his job to follow his passion is genuinely beautiful and inspirational as hell, if not even sounding a little like your typical success story, almost like an anime protagonist. And it's those exact main character-like qualities of his backstory that led to the memes about Garnt being the protagonist of the Trash Taste amongst the fanbase. But it also left people wondering about other alternate possibilities. What if Garnt had never left the BBC? What if Gigguk had never returned? And that's exactly the what if story the BBC timeline, also known as the original timeline, explores. In this timeline, Trash Taste is never conceived, as Mei Lin never sees the potential in Yanitube, and while Garnt and Sydney are still happily married in the UK, Garnt feels an emptiness in his life that he can't explain, a lack of something that always lingered in the back of his mind. In the BBC timeline, Joey and Connor still die due to an unknown reason, and this is the part of this timeline where we reach our first convergence point, the deaths of Connor and Joey, but let's not worry about that right now. Eventually, the emptiness leads Garnt to quit his job at the BBC and uses his engineering degree to score a job at CERN. Yes, that CERN from Steins Gate, don't worry about it, and he invents the first prototype of the phone wave, a technology capable of sending radio waves to the past. This is also the timeline in which Garnt's son, Joseph Connor Maniatoffa, was born. He doesn't know why he named his son that, but it weirdly brought him comfort. Now the director for the Phone Wave project, we reach our second convergence point in the multiverse, the first DN mail, which is sent to a random truck driver in the vast multiverse. However, during the first trial, the now Professor Garnt Manitafo feels a strong urge to redo his life, and despite knowing the risks involved, Garnt sends a second D-mail to his past self, warning himself of the life that awaited him if he stayed at the BBC. And this is where we reach our first ending, the Steve Handjobs ending. You can take the man out of the trash, but you can't take the trash out of man. While the Garnt of the BBC timeline have never found the fulfillment he was looking for, it did act as the trigger to a different timeline. A timeline where Garnt receives the DN mail from his alternate self and quits his job at the BBC. However, you'll quickly learn that the Garnt that received this DN mail isn't the same Garnt from our timeline, because the alternate universe this mail reached would become to known as the Dark Timeline. In this timeline, the events of Garnt's life before Trash Taste plays out pretty similarly to our own. Garnt quits his job at the BBC and returns from his long break to become a YouTuber. Mei Lin sees the potential in Anitube and Trash Taste is created. But the earthquake on March 3rd happens and the convergence point happens again. Connor and Joey die in the earthquake. Garnt and Sydney still get married in this timeline, but Garnt's sanity slowly begins to slip. Unable to accept the deaths of his two best friends, Garnt continues to show up to the studio every week to record episodes of Trash Taste by himself, going on to record the second annual Trash Taste Awards before Daidas and Emirichu, who had just arrived at Japan, are recruited to replace the boys. The grief-stricken Garnt is unable to accept his change, and unable to move on, Trash Taste is disbanded, with Chris Broad hosting one final 24-hour charity stream in remembrance of the boys, becoming a member of Trash Taste even just for a little while. After Trash Taste disbands, Garnt and Sydney return to the UK, back to what little semblance of normalcy they had left. First of all, wow, that was depressing, and secondly, if any of this is starting to sound completely insane and incomprehensible to some of you, oh boy, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. The Darkest Timeline, not to be confused with the Dark Timeline, closely follows the events of the Dark Timeline, except in this universe, Garnt just receives the memories of the boys' deaths and the blueprints of a time machine, and attempts to travel back in time to save the boys. Except Mei Lin, who turns out to be an agent of CERN after having been warned by CERN agent Ashley about the threat Garnt is to the multiverse, was the one behind the deaths of the boys all along, and captures Garnt to force feed him copium, keeping him docile while extracting the memories of the time machine from his brain, after which Mei Lin succeeds in building the time machine, but the world just ends in this timeline for some reason, and Garnt awakens from his long slumber of coping to a destroyed Earth, finding the remains of CERN's time machine and traveling back in time despite knowing its risks, ending up in the Dark Dimension. The Dark Dimension, not to be confused with the Dark Timeline or the Darkest Timeline, is an endless loop of Garnt traveling back in time and attempting to save the boys, only to fail every time, as he is forced to watch his friends die over and over again, slowly driving him into insanity, until finally, he kills the boys with his own hands and escapes the time loop, the timeline splitting off as one becomes evil Garnt and the other the Garnt who eats crusts. But while all of this is happening, the boys who died in the earthquake, Connor and Joey's souls, are transferred into the afterlife, where they have the Death Parade special, playing a game in Quindecim to determine where they'll end up in the afterlife. However, the boys are saved when a certain Death's apprentice, Calliope Mori, pays them a visit in the afterlife, having a spin-off episode of the Chadcast before she sends them off to be isekai'd, while she sets off to visit her own kohais. Bringing us back to the isekai timeline. Joey is born as DZ Newts, while Connor is reborn as Mira, and the boys reunite with a different Garnt from another universe, who had been hit by a truck after that same DN mail from the BBC timeline had reached the truck driver, now known as Taro Yamada. The events of the TRPG stream play out, but in a deleted post-credit scene, a familiar face appears to take the mind bofa from DZ Newts. None other than Chris Broad, who now went by the name Kranos. Wait, hold up. Who the hell is Kranos? Well, that all starts from the Dank World line, is another alternate reality in which only Joey survives the Fukushima earthquake after watching the hit Netflix show Arcane. But in this timeline, instead of being driven to insanity, Joey develops schizophrenia. Trash Taste continues with Chris Broad replacing Garnt and Connor, except in this reality, Joey and Chris no-clip out of reality, ending up in the back rooms. After Chris and Joey wake up under the yellow fluorescent lights and the old rotten carpets of the backrooms, the pair begin to wander, narrowly avoiding death many times and traversing its various levels. Joey, who is still depressed and schizophrenic, begins hallucinating episodes of Trash Taste on the walls, being separated from Chris, leaving him to wander the backrooms all alone. And as Chris wanders through the endless yellow corridors of the backrooms, something inside him changes. Something snaps. He was Mr. Affable until he wasn't, and after wandering upon an old shrine deep inside the backrooms, now having become Killer Chris, he finds a strange gauntlet before finding an exit and finally escaping the backrooms, eager to solve the mysteries of the gauntlet. While back in the backrooms, Joey, although separated from Chris, manages to survive by himself. His mind fading, yet never losing his sense of morality as Chris did, Joey stumbles upon a mysterious level of the backrooms. An infinite void, with 1,000 voices in his head whispering him to jump in. Jumping into the void, Joey is consumed, and Dr. Jelly, also known as Josh the Hentai Lad, is born. Dr. Jelly also escapes the backrooms. Now having escaped the backrooms, Chris uses the power of his new gauntlet to travel to a new universe. No, creating his own twisted reality, the Broad Taste Worldline. In this timeline, Killer Chris films a documentary on Kadokawa, the company Meilin and Trash Taste is based in, and convinces Meilin to let him host a podcast. Convincing Joey and Connor to join him, the Broad Broadcast is born, but because its acronym is spelled BBC, the name is changed to Broad Taste. However, the Chris in this timeline isn't the Chris as we know him, and after a series of directional disagreements, the non-affable Chris murders Mei Lin and takes full control of the podcast for himself. The timeline continues as normal. However, during the filming of the hit song ASO Too Much Volcano, the volcano erupts behind the crew, killing Joey and Natsuki and pushing Chris to a new level of insanity. The timeline continues, but Connor begins to grow concerned about Chris's mental state. This is pushed further when the day after Broad Taste's first anniversary, Chris uploads the Journey Across Japan series as if Joey and Natsuki hadn't died, causing a huge controversy and dividing his fanbase. The podcast becomes less profitable after the controversy, and the crazed Killer Chris takes over the Anime Man's channel to make up for losses. However, Connor demands that Chris stops profiting off of the boy's death. Chris agrees, but it becomes obvious that another breakup is imminent. The last straw is when Connor finally tells Chris that he's quitting the podcast to become a VTuber. Infuriated by this, Chris begins to chase down Connor and his good friend Pete with murder in his eyes. All hope seems lost when a savior arrives. Iron Mouse joins the battle. Now with the murderous Chris after him, Connor, Iron Mouse, and Pete are forced to defect to another country and live in hiding. Chris relaunches his podcast with new hosts and begins to gain popularity again, but this time, Connor also prepares something. You see, Connor's British lineage and status as a JoJo fan allowed him to study Magecraft and Hamon at the Clock Tower, hoping to gain enough power to put an end to Chris and his tyranny. Connor trains. While all of this is happening, Chris, who is still on the hunt for Connor, gets into Japanese politics and becomes the Prime Minister of Japan to start a global manhunt for Connor. Chris becomes a dictator, abolishing the Japanese constitution and re-establishing Imperial Japan. Connor manages to stay hidden by summoning a bunch of clones of himself, until finally, he masters his power, becoming the Dr. Ligma. Learning of the Alpha World lines and determined to become powerful enough to one day end Chris once and for all, Dr. Ligma sets off into the multiverse, finally escaping the Broad Taste timeline. Still with me? Well, I hope so, because we haven't even gotten started on the complicated timelines yet. Like, why is there a cat world line? And who came up with Nyarnt? What the hell is a Garnstrumentality timeline? And where does Garntalactus come from? Garnt becomes a god in this timeline, and we haven't even gotten started on the Holy Grail War, but actually, the Holy Grail War is important because that's where Garnt Alter and Dr. Fate is from. And there's an entire timeline which is just a parody of Steins Gate Zero that's just There. As far as I know, it doesn't share any significant connections to the other timelines, not to mention I have no idea what they're talking about because I haven't watched Steins Gate Zero. What the fuck is a Looped Among Us? This is the point in my research where my mind began to break. At this point, the Trash Taste timeline was bigger than anything I had ever imagined it would be. How was I supposed to present this information in a way that was coherent and made sense? It took Giguk 30 minutes to explain the Fate timeline, with over 10 years of video making experience under his belt. I've barely been doing it for under a year, and my longest video is 14 minutes. But what scared me even more is that it actually began to make sense. Here was this abomination of a timeline made by a bunch of Redditors with no planning or coordination, but I felt like I was beginning to grasp it, and I knew I couldn't stop. This story had to be told, and I had to be the one to do it. And in order to reach the climax of this story, we have to go back to where we originally started, to the end of the original Dark timeline. You see, a little while ago when I was telling you all about the original Dark timeline, I actually lied to you. Garnt being driven to insanity and moving back to London wasn't the end of the Dark timeline. Here's the story that I didn't tell you. The year is 2025. After returning to his homeland, Garnt would run into someone in the clock tower in Westminster that would change the course of the multiverse forever. Aaron Kruger, because you see, being the main character that he is, Garnt learns that he descended from a family that bears a powerful magic crest, and having the potential to harness true magic, the only thing preventing him from becoming a menace to the multiverse was his own adamant depression. Oh, and if none of what I said makes sense to you, don't worry about it, it's just Fate lore. But with extensive and arduous training, something inside Garnt snaps, and a new fire is lit inside him. He keeps moving forward, until the boys are brought back. With his newfound passion, no, obsession, Garnt masters true magic, and now only needs a catalyst in order to break the barrier and reach the root of the world. Again, don't worry about it, and coincidentally, that catalyst would appear sooner than he expected, in the form of the second convergence point, the first ever DN mail Professor Garnt had sent all those universes ago in the BBC timeline. As the message traversed across the vast multiverse, it had caused a breach within the fabrics of space and time itself, giving the now dubbed Sorcerer Supreme Garnt just enough of a window to use his second and third magic, leaving his wife Sydney behind and entering Akasha, leading into an event that would come to be known as the First Akashic Collapse.
Warden of Time, I've come to bargain. I would like to turn back time and return
I'm gonna have to stop you right there. That little request which you desire has millions of consequences.
I'm well aware of that. Even so, I must go back in time so I can save them. I'll do whatever it takes to bring back our times together.
I'm afraid you weren't listening to me. I must ask you to leave. Now.
I was hoping it didn't have to come to this, but... Here I go! It's been 2 years since you boys were gone. I will do my best to overcome this and bring you guys back. But if I don't... Joey, Connor, maybe I'll finally join you guys together.
Well, well, but is it my good friend? Garnt.
Callie?
Sorry to interrupt, but... I can't just let my friends kill each other now. Callie-senpai?
With the help of Calliope Mori and a little convincing, the Warden of Time no longer stands in Garnt's path. However, the absence of the Warden would soon be revealed to have some dire, unforeseen consequences on the multiverse. You see, now that the Warden of Time was gone, the Garnt who laughs, who had been imprisoned in Akasha by the Watcher Ladybeard, was freed from his seal, and from his shackles, dubbing himself Dark Garnt Supreme, kills Ladybeard and takes the Soul Bofa, using it and the power of Akasha to pull in every Garnt from across every universe, setting into motion the Great Garnt Battle Royale. Every Garnt from every timeline is here. Garnt, Grant, Monk Garnt, Giga Chad Garnt, Dark Garnt, Garnt Alter, Fate Garnt, Old Garnt, Gangster Garnt, Female Garnt, Sigma Male Garnt, Sad Garnt, Omori Garnt, Second Channel Garnt, God himself. The battle seems endless, but amidst the chaos, a familiar face slips into the infinite fighting. Dr. Ligma.
So sad. Steve Handjobs died of Ligma.
What's Ligma?
Ligma balls!
And determined to end this meaningless conflict once and for all, Dr. Ligma kills Dark Garnt Supreme, taking the Soul Stone back from him. And thus, the machinations of Dark Garnt were finally put to an end. However, the war was far from over, as finally, we reached the climax of this story. Because you see, the actions of Dark Garnt Supreme weren't without their consequences. Pulling Garnts from all the different timelines across the multiverse had caused the universes to collapse into each other, triggering a domino effect of incursions that would come to be known as the Akashic Incursion. And the different sides of the multiverse began forming alliances, all in preparation for the final battle. All of their choices, paths, and dreams coalesced into one gigantic battle to decide the fate of the multiverse. The ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. On one side of the multiverse was the Council Alliance, headed by Dr. Ligma and Dr. Jelly, who had become best friends after meeting in their travels across the multiverse. With the support of the Council of Garnts, who had been warned of the incoming war that loomed over them, they set out to recruit powerful allies for their cause. The three Watchers of the Multiverse, Kaho, Ladybeard, and PewDiePie, as well as the help of the Queen of Demons Ironmouse and her servant. Infernal Beelzebub Anarchia, Cruel the Apocalypse, the opposite of Divine, Prince of Suffering and Torment, Master of all sin, Conqueror of the Underworld, and the King of all demonkind, Booby. The Council also seeks the help of their most powerful ally, Ongenful Null. Don't ask me who that is, I don't fucking know. On the other side of the galaxy, the Broadcast Alliance. After attaining godlike powers from the Infinity Gauntlet, Kranos seeks out Dr. Fate from the Fate timeline, another user of true magic, and proposes a plan. A plan to create the perfect world line, where he and Dr. Fate could finally be happy. With 3 of the Infinity Stones already in his possession, he only needed to collect the remaining 3 to attain absolute power at the snap of his fingers. His plan was to summon Garnt Galactus directly into the root of Akasha itself in order to distract the Council Alliance, while he slips away to steal the remaining stones. Dr. Fate is reluctant to join him, but he decides to go along with them for now, seeing no other choice. So Dr. Fate prepares a gate to the deepest parts of the trash dimension to summon an army of minions. With both sides having made their preparations, plans, and alliances, it was finally time. Time for war. The Akashic Incursion had begun. Dr. Ligma, Dr. Jelly, and God arrive with their army at Akasha first and get into defensive positions, preparing for battle. They could sense it. He was coming. The Akashic Incursion War had just begun. Immediately as they arrive, Dr. Fate brings down the wrath of the Trash Realm, freeing its prisoners onto the battlefield as they rush at the Council Alliance. But Dr. Jelly single-handedly fends them off, allowing Dr. Ligma to get close enough to Dr. Fate to be able to battle him 1v1. While the Council Alliance are distracted, Kranos successfully summons Garnt Galactus into Akasha according to his plan. However, he hadn't accounted for the Council Alliance's secret weapon, Ongenful Null, and the two cosmic beasts clash while the two Watchers, Kaho and Ladybeard, catch up to Kranos to confront him. On the other side of the battlefield, Dr. Ligma and Dr. Fate are a close match, but Dr. Ligma is able to gain the edge over his foe using the power of the Power Stone. Being forced to retreat, Dr. Fate falls back to Kranos, who had been battling the Council by himself. You see, Dr. Fate had one more trick up his sleeve, a weapon he wished he didn't have to resort to.
Not. I've come to bargain.
Dr. Fate bargains with Nart, the Lord of the Trash Dimension, and convinces him to join the fight, summoning him to distract Dr. Ligma. Together with Kranos, Dr. Fate overpowers the Council Alliance, and all seems lost, when a member of the Watchers arrive late to the battlefield to even the tides. PewDiePie, the strongest Watcher, joins the battle. The Watchers, now finally reunited, are able to fight Dr. Fate and Kranos on equal grounds. The battle is grueling and it goes on for hours. The Watchers were powerful, but Kranos with the power of the Infinity Stones proved to be too much, even for the multiverse's most powerful beings. And the Watchers, after putting up a valiant fight, are defeated by the hands of Chris. Meanwhile, on the other side of Akasha, Dr. Fate and Dr. Ligma are weakened after hours of going head-to-head against each other, and in their final moments, they share a heart-to-heart.
I forgive you, Dr. Ligma. You may not be the Connor I wanted, but you're the Connor I needed.
While the Council is recovering, Kranos completes the Infinity Gauntlet and now holds infinite power in his hands. No one stands in his way, but there's one last hope. Realizing the mistakes of his ways, Dr. Fate finally offers to help the Council Alliance and tells them about the only way to stop Kranos. There's one way to stop Chris's madness, and the answer was to burn it all away. Gathering up what strength they had left, Dr. Ligma, Dr. Fate, and Dr. Jelly share a final moment together as they prepare for the multiverse to come to an end and sets off to complete their final tasks. Dr. Fate, who Kranos still believed to be his ally, kills the weakened Kranos from behind and taking the gauntlet, snaps Ongenful Null from existence. Meanwhile, Dr. Ligma performs his one final act. Using the power of the Mind Boffa, Connor erases the Dark Timeline from every living being's memories, and Garn Galactus is left to devour Akasha all alone. In the multiverse, every timeline, universe, and possibility converges upon one another, coming to one singular point. And then there was nothing. Everything ends and it's always sad, but everything begins again too, and that's always happy. That's the end of the timeline. Every story, characters, alternate realities, and weird lore. Something that seemed so expansive, incomprehensible, and daunting when I first set out to make this video, all leading up to this one moment. For everything to end and for there to be nothing. Because just like anything else on the internet, memes die, people lose interest, and just like anything in the world, things end. Things that seem big, important, or personal at the moment, all eventually fading into obscurity. At the start of the video, you might remember that I talked about Trash Taste's story of success and they're coming into the internet mainstream, but that too is one day going to end into nothingness, just like how the internet moves on from anything. Wow, that got pretty deep, and maybe it's pretty cringe of me to get this philosophical over what is basically a glorified collection of shitposts, but don't worry, cause that's not the note I plan to end this video off on at all. Because despite everything I just told you, there's still a part of the story that I haven't told yet. Not the story as in the collaborative work of a bunch of Redditors that came together because of something they loved, but the story of the community itself. The Trash Taste subreddit, and the exact reason why I found what came next after the trend of the Dark Timeline so fitting. Because despite everything, despite the countless failures and impossible odds, somewhere out there in the galaxy, Garnt succeeded. He saved the boys, fixed the timeline, and brought back Trash Taste. And the event that manifested the true ending of the Trash Taste Dark Timeline was none other than Garnt and Sydney's wedding. The community coming together and unanimously agreeing that this was it. The perfect ending to the Dark Timeline. And that's the note I want to end this video off on. That despite the fleeting nature of internet meme culture and Reddit shitposts, the Dark Timeline didn't just fade into obscurity, and neither will Trash Taste nor anything you've come to care about on this online space. Because when everything is over and we look back, we can find these little stories inside the things that happened on the internet, that happened for a reason. Bizarre, strange, beautiful stories that give an honest reflection into the creators and communities they stemmed from. And that's what the internet did to Trash Taste. This timeline, these memes, and this video you're watching right now being living proof of that. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that video. I just want to take a quick moment to say a thank you to Armo360 and Something Wong who compiled this entire timeline, artist Sir Luco who drew these amazing comics of the Garnt vs Warden of Time fight scenes, as well as Alex and Audie who are the voices of Garnt and Connor. This video was like 3 months late and took way too long to make, so I'm probably gonna go lie down for a bit, make some YouTube shorts or something. But what I can assure you is that the next upload will not take another 4 months, and thanks to anyone who stuck around for whatever reason. With that, I believe you've heard enough of my voice for today, so I'm signing out, and I'll see you on the next one.